we're going to go ahead and get our meeting started this evening. Good evening and welcome to our July 3rd City Council meetings. On the day before the Declaration of Independence was declared many, many years ago. So happy 4th of July holiday to all of you. Dana Keithley, followed by Susan Keithley.
Good evening, Council, members of the public. I would like to be able to address some of the discrepancies that are present in the recent San Bernardino County Grand Jury report. One of the first discrepancies to be noted is that the grand jury, by their own admission, did not conduct a thorough investigation. As you can see, they state that some of the allegations did not actually fall within the purview of the grand jury, yet they are not specific on what any of these items are. There's also no statement as to the methodology that was used to arrive at their findings. In comparing this report to the recent one that was just published last month by the Riverside County Grand Jury regarding the Indio Animal Shelter, they clearly explained theirs was based on hearing sworn testimony from city officials, shelter employees, volunteers, and a local veterinarian. Grand jury visitations included 3 unannounced visits. Sworn testimony is documented on several occasions within this report, yet this was not done in the RCAC report. Nowhere does it say interviews were conducted with multiple individuals. Instead, the grand jury's first visit was announced to the shelter and actually done during the shelter's open house on February 13, 2013, taking place 3 months after many of the dogs who had been confined to crates for 2 to 8 weeks had already been killed. Grand jury members, we must keep in mind, are everyday citizens of ordinary intelligence. They must have a sufficient knowledge of the English language, be over 18 years of age, and not have a criminal background. They do not have to have a background in law, nor have any special background in animal welfare or shelter issues. The second announced visit was done on March 8th and was a guided tour by Director Veronica Fincher. How does anybody think that this is a fair assessment of what has occurred at the center? It's almost like looking into parents who have been accused of abusing a child, and Child Protective Services is called, and they're going to let the parents know they're coming in on Christmas morning. Well, of course the parents are going to make everything look wonderful, presents under the tree, everyone is on their best behavior. Yet Child Protective Services doesn't talk to the actual child, they don't talk to the neighbor or anybody else who can actually demonstrate proof of the abuse. The parents are given a gold star. So of course the director of the Animal Center is going to give them the okay that's saying all the policies and procedures are being followed. It's very obvious that especially during that week, Veronica was not 100% honest with what was going on at the shelter. You can look at, we were tracking some of the walk charts, and based on photos of some of the walk charts that we're seeing, you can see for the walkies report for the actual week that the grand jury came in, they would have come in on Friday, March 8th. You can see there were a number of dogs who were lucky to get out once that entire week. Some dogs, not at all. I guess that slipped Veronica's mind to point that out to the grand jury. So the grand jury themselves failed to understand it's not what you see, it's what you don't see. The other red flag, and why this report should really be taken with a grain of salt, the grand jury in their introduction especially want to thank the city manager of Rancho, Cucamonga. And this is Veronica's boss. Again, are we expected to get a fair assessment of what was occurring at the animal shelter? This is a man who had helped spread lies about what was said in meetings and told you, council, not to listen to any concerns that volunteers are bringing to you. And we're supposed to expect a fair and unbiased report? I don't think so. And by looking at how anxious Mr. Gillison has been in sending this report out to everyone in the city, it's another example of how quick he and Veronica are to produce propaganda and distract from the real issues of trying to improve the RC Animal Center, again, for the animals. And according to the grand jury guidelines, it's supposed to be a confidential report, at least until it's actually published online. So Councilman Spagnolo, how is it that you knew about the report? You were quoted in the Daily Bulletin newspaper on April 20th saying that the city was under an investigation. And several staff members were heard over talking about it at the actual animal center. Again, if it was supposed to be confidential, why was it out 2 months before the report was actually published? To quote Shakespeare, something is rotten in the state of Denmark. Thank you.
Susan Keithley, followed by Jesse Kreider.
Good evening, Council. Susan Keithley. The grand jury investigation was an absolute one-sided investigation, and I'm going to respond to each complaint. 1, dogs confined to crates for long periods of time without exercise. Kennel notes documented dogs were crated up to 8 weeks and then killed for behavior. On September 30th, 2012, volunteer liaison Terry Jacobs sent out an inappropriate worded email via the volunteer liaison email with Veronica's approval, stating, not only did you videotape our overcapacity crates in the hall, you posted them on a national publicly accessed internet website. Brilliant. The director was already killing them, so what did you think was going to happen to those dogs? So if the grand jury does not see it, then it didn't happen? They had no reason to investigate further? 2, staff discharging firearms on the RC grounds in violation of city code ordinance. They clearly state, due to the lack of evidence, the grand jury was unable to substantiate this allegation, so the matter has still not been resolved. 3, funds raised at charity events were not used exclusively for the benefit of animals by RCAC. I was always told that if a person writes a check to the community foundation and does not put in the memo line that it's for the shelter, then it does not go to the shelter. It goes into the general fund. At a 2011 special animal shelter meeting, volunteer Terry Jacobs got up and demanded to know where the $175,000 was. Clearly, she was not trusting at that time, and she had a right to ask that question. Did the grand jury do an audit of the books or just take it at face value? And why, after 8 years, do they not have a 501c3? 4, claims of a higher rate of adoption that was actually experienced. The shelter's own numbers from January to September of 2012 show an adoption rate closer to 40%. The rest is creative accounting based on changing category names, including all kinds of transfers to and from foster, taken by rescue, etc. for the live outcome number. Did the grand jury see the backup records which generated the shelter's numbers? 5, off-site animal adoptions, dog training classes, and other programs have been reduced or discontinued. They cite no dog left behind, which has been eliminated due to the lack of volunteers. Quarterly training classes replaced by 1 in 2012, and volunteer participants were not impressed. No promotion at all since Veronica has been director. In fact, 2 staff members asked us, when are you going to do a promotion? We said we can't. Veronica won't let us. The quality of all programs has been greatly reduced. Mr. Gillison, your statement regarding you are building a community in which every adoptable pet finds a home is absolutely meaningless and is not a commitment to do anything, especially where the term adoptable is so subjective. The shelter has not been transparent at all about what they consider adoptable or undoptable. Where are their written criteria? What does that really mean? It sounds good if you just take it at face value, like the grand jury did, but it's really just rubbish. It has been the guise for killing more animals under Director Fincher. And we will be back with more proof that we were not the only 4 who felt this way. We have lots of emails, and we will be back. Thank you.
Jesse Kreider, followed by Allison Kreider.
Hello. Veronica told Nicole that only RVTs and certified employees were allowed to euthanize. The grand jury said that the shelter is transparent. I am not an RVT, nor have I been certified, nor have I been enrolled in euthanasia training, yet I was ordered by shelter management to euthanize. The 3rd dog I euthanized, I was unable to hit the vein. I finally hit the vein after sticking the dog multiple times. Nicole took Veronica's statements as truth until she spoke with me just a few minutes prior to council starting. So how can the grand jury say that the shelter is being transparent when they obviously are not? And this investigation, grand jury, was one-sided, absolutely. I know all about it, and so does your director of human resources. He knows all about one-sided investigations. Also, I wanted to comment on the whole supposed death threat from a little old lady in Mississippi. I was, a known gang member said he was going to take my life. I called the police department. They said, you should probably not go into that neighborhood anymore. What did shelter management tell me? They said, you should probably watch your back. This is just a street right just 2 miles away from my work. But yet, Veronica gets a whole multiple police officer escort, and I'm told to watch my back from a known gang member. Doesn't make any sense. Thank you.
Allison Kreider, followed by Andra Gilbertson.
Hello, Mayor, Council. Excuse me. My name is Allison Kreider. I am a current volunteer at the animal shelter and have been since 2007. I'm going to read 2 emails to show other volunteers had some of our same concerns. August 21st, 2012. There are shelters out there that do not even feed or water the animals or give water to the animals in their custody, basically torturing them. Our shelter is boasting about following these accords. In my mind, this is a very low bar. I thought our city was going to do better, but apparently not. August 29th, 2012. This is in response to questions from Diana Sholey for the first Daily Bulletin article that was to be released the following month. Diana's first question: why are you unhappy with the current state of the shelter? The volunteer's response: I have been a volunteer for 6 years and have seen the shelter get worse, not better. When I started 6 years ago, they were working on becoming a no-kill shelter. You would think that after 6 years of work, they would be much closer than they are today. The kennels are a mess most days. Playgroups have been greatly reduced. Playgroups are conducted by volunteers and aid in reducing the kennel stress that the dogs get after being in the shelter environment for any length of time. They do nothing to promote the animals. They leave that to the volunteers, but do not allow them to do promotions. They currently send out an urgent plea for a group of dogs that will be euthanized in 1 week and watch volunteers go crazy trying to save them. While the whole time the animal was in the custody of the shelter, nothing was done to promote the animal. They have greatly reduced off-sites. These are events that volunteers, along with shelter staff, take dogs to community events to promote the shelter and the animals. They were caught in July of last year pulling dogs from public view 3 to 4 days prior to being euthanized. The dogs had no final chance of being seen by the public for possible adoption. Thankfully, a volunteer noticed this and brought it to the director's attention. Both dogs were moved back to the public kennel area. In general, there seems to be a lack of transparency. Diana's second question: what would need to happen to make the current state better? The volunteer's response was: involve the volunteers as in past with promotions. In general, we need to work together. The current shelter leadership does not seem to think that is necessary. Have regular volunteer and staff meetings to brainstorm about helping the animals. It seems the shelter's main priority is making propaganda videos for every council meeting instead of spending time making videos to promote the animals in their care. When I checked this morning, there was not one video on their website. This is the animal shelter, and what kind of compassionate staff would keep help from their animals? Since I have a few extra minutes, I wasn't planning on going over this, but if you could put that on the overhead, please. The grand jury was supposed to not be discussed, but here it is. If you could zoom in on it, zoom in there for me. Discussed in meeting minutes. I picked up a piece of trash in the parking lot, and it just happened to be these notes. It says right here, they will be surprise visiting us again, meaning the first one was announced, the next one was announced. Make sure trash is picked up, center looks presentable at all times. This sounds like the grand jury was actually working with the shelter to make sure it looked good as opposed to investigating them. Seems like another one-sided investigation as they announced all visits and the shelter was prepared. Thank you.
Andra Gilbertson, followed by Vicki Roost.
My name is Andra Gilbertson. I am a volunteer at the Rancho shelter. I'd like to show a few dogs that are available for adoption right now. These dogs are on the floor, but they have no videos or absolutely no marketing. Let's see, this. There you go. This is Jamina. She is a real beauty. Green eyes. She's a red-nosed little pit bull, champagne coat. She has been at the shelter since last September. She is very friendly and would be a great dog for someone who loves to go hiking or hunting. She pulls on the leash a little in her excitement, but off the leash and in the yard, she is a real clown. The next doggie I have is Lucy Sky. Lucy Sky, she's a blue and white pitty. She's about 5.5 years old. She's been here since September. When her adopter returned her adopter was just sobbing, but she had lost her home, and her new landlord did not allow dogs. Lucy would probably do well with the only dog. Now, these dogs have been at the shelter since last September, 10 months. The shelter says they will exhaust every option to find a home. I would love to see even one example where a phone call, an email, something has been done to get these little doggies a home. Next we have Zoe. Zoe is a beautiful little blue and white pitty, approximately 3 years old. She's been there since December. She is an absolute doll, a lovable, cuddly, and funny. Her Christmas present last year was a trip to the shelter. I am concerned because she is getting stressed in the shelter, but once out in the yard, she is totally changed and very well-behaved doggie and cannot give you enough love. She needs a home now. Next we have Melrose. Melrose is a blue and white pitty, been there since February. She is a doll in every sense of the word. Last week when I was walking her, a gentleman approached and held out his hand for her to shake. She immediately plunked her little butt on the ground, held out her paw, tail wagging and smiling at him all the time. I don't know how he could resist this charmer. Then we have Lydia. Lydia is another little blue pit bull. She's been there since March. She's 2 years old. Concerned about her because she is a high energy girl. She's very active and not getting any exercise. She is a true love. She'd be a great family dog. She loves men, women, and children. One of her favorite little tricks is doing the combat crawl on the cool grass with a big smile on her face. If anyone can help these doggies, they are all, as all doggies are, in danger. Please visit our shelter. Here are a couple dogs that didn't make it out. The first one here is King. King is a blue pitty. When I was walking him either December or January, I noticed he was extremely ill. I put that notice on the board by the tech room, and he disappeared from the kennels. And when I asked, I heard he was on medication. I asked about him repeatedly, and the reply I got was he was improving. I saw him back on the kennel floor on January 30th, very skinny and still not well. He died on February 3rd in his kennel. The autopsy revealed he died of diverticulitis and peritonitis. This is agony and horrendously painful. I was in the hospital on a morphine drip for a week with it, no food or no water. Yet they tried to feed King every day. A simple test would have determined his problem. But no, I'm sure there was a cost factor involved, so he was allowed to suffer for 4 to 6 weeks in agony. And we have a veterinarian on staff. And Diane Davis, the volunteers that would have saved him had already been fired. And per their instructions from Veronica, they were not allowed to interfere with any dog or with any shelter whatsoever. And I'm not as brave as they are. These reasons are why we need an adoption and a rescue person on site so we can start working with these dogs immediately and save them from this horrendous death. Thank you.
Vicki Roost, followed by Dorothy Birchfield.
Good evening, council members and members of the public. I would like to address the comments regarding the Rancho Cucamonga Shelter's foster program. No member of that group has said that Rancho does not have a better foster program for kittens and puppies than many of the other shelters around. Having been a foster parent in the program, I know the service provided is a wonderful help. The program had already been in place successfully for years before Veronica came, and luckily for the animals, it was one of the few things she decided to continue. They do a great job with young animals, and we would love to see the same effort made for the adult animals. The remark that only one person in that group has fostered, like so many other things said, is just not true, including saying I only fostered around 50 animals when the number is closer to 100, the majority being from Rancho. I believe if someone even fostered one animal, that is important and should be commended and not belittled. A life is a life, and everyone counts. You may not change the world fostering one animal, but for that one animal, their world is changed forever. I suppose that is the difference between our two groups. They are content with their save rate, proud that they are better than some of the worst shelters in the state, if not the country. That group sees the value of each life that comes through those shelter doors. And the thought of losing even one who could have been saved and wanted to live is a tragedy. We do not want our city shelter to be better than the worst. We want our shelter to be the best. We did not watch King die. We had no idea what was going on with him at all since we had been fired. On January 30th, a volunteer noted he was finally out of the quarantine kennels where the volunteers are not allowed anymore. She went back February 3rd and he was dead. We did a public records request, and that's when we learned the timeline of his suffering and the painful death. We'd have absolutely tried to save him, as we did for other Rancho alumni like Grace Kelly, who ended up at DeVore, and Ivory, who ended up at San Bernardino City Shelter. We were able to get them out of there. Not to mention Sabrina, Jelly, Durwood, Petal, and most recently Casper, who we helped escape death at the shelter. However, the question and criticism is, why didn't the shelter save him? The grand jury did not address the fact that more animals are being killed than the prior year. According to the city's own records, rescues are down and killing is up. Only one training obedience class has been held since 2011. There have been no inspiring promotions on the same level as 2011. There are little to no videos on the website. Animals are rotting in their cages without walks. Animals are being mislabeled and then killed. Not every avenue is explored and exhausted to save innocent lives. Is any of this illegal? Not at all, but that doesn't mean it's moral or ethical, and not what the public expects based on what they're being told. This is not what the Rancho Cucamonga taxpayers, voters, and animal lovers want from their city shelter. So yes, maybe the grand jury did not find a problem with the budget or the cage size, but that does not make what is going on at the RC shelter right or okay. For someone not to see that is frightening and shameful. It can be better. Rancho citizens want better, and the animals deserve better. Thank you.
Kevin King, followed by John Lyons.
Good evening, City Council. One of the biggest issues I think that we're seeing is that our shelter is really starting to bear some frightening similarities to the Pasadena shelter, and not surprisingly, that's where our current director hails from. Here's a small list that I wanted to read you of some of the issues that are particularly alarming under Veronica Fincher's regime. Pit bull promotions have all but stopped, and they were the most euthanized breed in 2012, almost double of any of the other breeds. Why aren't these promos in place anymore? These dogs are especially at risk and need more help than the others. That's why targeted promotions are really effective in helping them get these dogs placed to their forever homes. The caretakers at the shelter who do the evaluations do not have any behavioral rehabilitation plans for the dogs, and this is evidenced by the profiles of the dogs killed in 2013 from January to April. It's simply classify the animal as unadoptable, then put it down. That's unacceptable. Rancho now only has one dog per kennel, effectively cutting down the number of animals that can be housed at any one time. Caretakers no longer pair the animals and refuse volunteer help to do so. This reduces our city's availability to help at-risk dogs. Dogs are social animals. They thrive through social companionship. Dogs no longer get out daily or even weekly at the Rancho shelter since Veronica has been there, and volunteers have dwindled. Can you imagine what life would be like if you were trapped in a cage all day, unable to be walked because the volunteers most likely to give you a few breaths of fresh air have been removed from their positions? Volunteers have no longer been allowed to go in on holidays during Veronica's tenure. These are the days that all of us have off. It makes no sense to restrict access to the shelter to the volunteers on the days that they're most available. It was well documented on several occasions in 2012 and 2013 that several dogs had no beds or blankets while in their kennel. These dogs were forced to sleep on a hard concrete floor. This is the new normal over at the Rancho shelter now that Veronica has been director. A lot of dogs are being deemed unadoptable, being put down. There's more dogs going right now out of the back door than there are out of the front door. And more did in Veronica's first year as director as compared to previous years. Many of these same problems were noted in an email by Suzanne Bouquet in an email back to 2011 when she toured the Pasadena shelter where Veronica was the number 2 in charge. If you'd like to read that email, we'll be posting it later on the That Group Facebook page. Our city shelter is starting to turn into a clone of Pasadena. That's not a good thing for the animals. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Grand jury, boy, that conjures up some images for me, and it certainly sounds impressive. I used to think that the grand jury was an investigative branch of the district attorney's office with both investigative and prosecutorial duties. Years ago, I learned that it's just ordinary people like me, just volunteers. So I would like to put this in perspective for you. Imagine, if you will, that there's an issue with the fire department. Would you think that I'm qualified to go in and give you a report about whether or not it's running efficiently or effectively, or the hospital or the police department? I have no background, no knowledge of how the fire, the police, or San Antonio Hospital runs. So if I were to go at an open house, go with a tour of the leader, and then, do one unannounced visit, how would I be able to determine whether or not it was right or wrong or good or bad? You, Mayor Michaels, have a background in fire. You would be far more qualified than me to go and assess, say, Ontario's fire department, because you have the expertise, you have the knowledge, you have the background. You would see things that I would have no idea, and you would know the questions to ask, the rules and regulations. I wouldn't know the first question to ask about it. So I'm all for having an independent third-party study, but it needs to be somebody with a background who knows what to ask, and that's why I've been asking you, let's bring Nathan back. I'll be the first one to say, if you bring Nathan back to see if our shelter is on track or not and to assess it as an independent person, if he says, yes, we're on track, we're doing everything right, I'll be the first one to be out of here, and I won't be here at another council meeting, because I'm not here to be a gadfly. I'm here because I've already invested thousands of hours in this, many years, as have you, and we have all worked together to give the city tremendous resources. To put some sort of value on this report is as ridiculous as having me come in and assess the fire department, the police department, or San Antonio Hospital and saying that that has merit whether I say it's good or bad. We need somebody who is qualified to ask the right questions. I can give you some examples of this. When that person brought up that there were 6 cats in the shelter and I asked you, Mr. Alexander, to look into it, you then called me upset saying you should know it's not cat season when you checked into it. It wasn't until I did a records request through somebody else, looked to see that 16 cats had been put down the day before. The grand jury wouldn't have known that, and neither would have you, and you've done background shelter tours with the county. So if anybody would have had more information, it would have been you than the grand jury. But even you didn't know, and I didn't know until I did the records request. So how can we expect a grand jury to know when they don't even know what questions to ask? I can take this away from our shelter and say in Upland, I did a shelter tour with council members at the time, and they didn't know what questions to ask. So I was asking the director, what drug do you use for euthanasia? They said, and I said, brand name, and they said sodium phenobarbital. And I'm like, that's the active ingredient. I want the brand. They said Fatal Plus. I said exclusively. They said yes. Did a records request and was able to determine that they were using Euthasol on cats, which is not by the manufacturer's label okay to do. How would anybody have known that if they hadn't known what questions to ask and then done the records request to determine if it was accurate or not? I have asked, hey, who is doing euthanasia? I've been told it was certified people or RVTs only. Only by asking have I found out that that is not the case, and yet we have all worked to put a veterinarian and vet techs on staff in our shelter so that this kind of thing wouldn't happen, not to mention it is against the euthanasia guidelines to have an uncertified, unqualified person performing euthanasia. And why would we do that when we have put the resources there? I am asking you to bring back Nathan Winograd and have him do the investigation so that we can assess truly where our shelter is. I have so many more things that I want to present to you, and the fact, I have things here that show that they were fired because they came to council meetings. I have it here, and if I had time, I'd be happy to present it to you. I'd also show you that staff has not complied with their own euthanasia guidelines that were written by the current director, and that they are not held to the standard of following their own policies and procedures, and yet when a volunteer speaks out, they are let go. Can you imagine if a volunteer said, hey, you know what, the fire trucks are being fueled on the way to a call, and then people were saying in the fire department, hey, that's affecting our perception and you're creating a hostile work environment. You need to go because we don't want people to know that our response time is being delayed because we're fueling our trucks on the way out.
Thank you. Thank you. David Dykstra.
Good evening, City Council. My name is David Dykstra. I'm a resident of Rancho, Cucamonga, a long time. I wasn't planning to speaking tonight, just kind of see how the grand jury thing played out. I like to make a parallel. It's not going to be very popular, but I think it's important. Tomorrow's the 4th of July. It's very, very important. Of course, it's not about fireworks. It's what they represent. I'll give myself, hopefully, a little bit of credibility, at least for what I want to say. I am a combat veteran. I was in the U.S. Marine Corps. I was an 0331 machine gunner, M60 Echo 3, M50 or 50 cal, Mark 19 40 millimeter grenade launch machine gunner. I served in the first Gulf War. I was shot at. They estimate the closest the rounds got from the very, very rusty ammunition was about 2,200 yards. So nothing compared to what our fellows are facing these days. But back then, the fear was gas. And it was very, very real. And when we had to go in, I was in a unit called 1st Battalion 7th Marines, attached to a unit called Task Force Ripper. We were the northernmost unit, combat infantry, going into Kuwait. Our mission was to liberate the city. It was the most terrifying 48 hours of my life, but came back fine, no problem, and grew my hair when I got out. So just want to say this. The parallel is this, the flag. Back then, the groups that had the courage to stand up to the oppression that, before the United States was really formed, it took a lot of courage. It took a lot of courage going against resistance, going against the odds, people that believed in a cause. My parallel is this. These folks behind me, the purple shirt folks, just inspire me beyond anything else. They remind me of what it must have been like to stand up against people who knew what was right and really didn't choose to take the action, so they kind of had to take it into their own hands. I'm not promoting violence at all. It's not what this is about. It's about character. These people inspire me. I get stopped at Ralph's every once in a while. They say, what's going on with the city council? How come they're not doing anything? When I first came here, I said, give them time. They're asking me now. Truthfully, I don't know what that answer is, but I'm very, very proud to be associated with these folks, even loosely. It's inspiring what they do. Please do the right thing for the animals. Thank you. Happy 4th of July.
Veronica, the following item has no legal publication or posting requirements. Another presentation of the San Bernardino County Grand Jury Report for 2012-13 regarding our Animal Care and Adoption Center. Mr. Gillison. Veronica?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. So as you're aware, there has been a lot of public discussion about the Animal Center. In the last 9 months, we have had several inspections through outside agencies upon alleged complaints, but the largest of that was the San Bernardino County Grand Jury. So a little bit of history on the grand jury. Every county is required to have a grand jury. They are made up of a panel of 19 to 23 people who live in the county, and their main responsibility is to provide oversight and investigate reports of complaints of local government agencies. Complaints are filed by members of the public, and so once complaints are filed, the grand jury has a complaint committee that they'll review the complaints, and if warranted, they'll conduct an investigation and then report on their investigation. So in December 2012, the grand jury received a complaint with a number of allegations related to animal care and mismanagement at the animal center. The complaints were as follows: dogs confined to crates or not having appropriate room to move and get exercise, staff discharging firearms on the grounds in violation of city codes, funds that were raised for charitable events were not going back to the animals, that claims of higher adoption rate than what there really was, and that off-site adoption events and other enrichment programs had been reduced or discontinued. So as a result, an investigation was conducted. The investigation was held over a period of several months. The grand jury visited our center on 3 different occasions. They came to our open house. That was not a planned event. The open house was planned, but them coming we were not aware of. They did come on a planned tour of the facility where they visited both public and non-public areas. And then they came on an unannounced visit in both public and non-public areas, and they also interviewed staff and volunteers. They also requested documentation about the center. So that documentation was budget information, community foundation information and tracking donations, statistics about animal statistics, volunteer hours, and policy and procedures of the animal center. So the findings of that report. So the grand jury issued a report that came out on Friday that all allegations are unfounded, and they also commended the animal center staff and existing volunteers for their level of dedication and commitment to our operation and care of the animals. The findings were that dogs were not confined to cages for long periods of time, that they were provided with adequate care. There was no evidence of a weapon being discharged, that funds raised and donations collected went right back to the animals. So if you donated to the animal center, it went to animal care. That adoption rates were accurately reported, and that programs promoting the animal center had not been discontinued. So programs like pack walks and play groups and enrichment programs for the animals are still continuing. With that knowledge, where do we go from here? Well, now that we've had some outside entities that are not related to the animal center look into the complaints and not find them founded, we want to put that aside and close that chapter and go forward. Our mission now is to focus on the animals and to focus on what we can do to help every animal get adopted. Our mission of building a community in which every adopted pet finds a home is just as important today as it was in 2006 when it was adopted by council. So a copy of the full report can be found on our city website. It's also on our Animal Center website and on our Facebook page. And I encourage everybody to like our Facebook page so that you can follow our adoption stories, upcoming events, and what's happening with the Animal Center. So that concludes my presentation. If there's any questions that I may address.
Questions of Ms. Fincher?
My question is, I'm going to follow up at the end with my comment, though.
Any questions? Thank you, Veronica. Thank you. Okay, and our next item council business, interagency reports and updates. Anyone have any updates for the council or the public? Council announcements?
Yes. Well, announcements? Yeah, that's our time.
Comments? Announcements? Whatever you wish to
Yes.
say.
We took quite a while tonight listening to a lot of stories about the Animal Care and Adoption Center. But in my estimation, regardless of what the grand jury report actually doesn't say, I think the shelter to some degree is broken. It needs repair, and we need to go back to the suggestion that was made earlier tonight. Nathan Winograd would be extremely disappointed in the way, and after we have paid so much taxpayer money to make a shelter that we can truly be proud of in every single way, we're missing a point. And I'm not saying try to hatchet something, I'm saying try to repair it. Try to bring back something that can be good again. We did have a volunteer group and a working staff group that worked hand in hand for years. Something happened somewhere. I hope it can be repaired. I'm disappointed, and I've been involved with grand jury, even investigation reports before. I'm sorry that it seemed to take a very short and brief look at this. I have friends on both sides of this issue. Some will be unhappy with me, some will not. But in all honesty, I can't say we're on the right track now. There were some suggestions made this evening to bring back some sanity to this and care about the animals, and I think we can.
Anyone else?
Well, if I could throw my 2 cents in here. You know, it's been 8 months since I've been on the council, and it's been a very unhealthy period. Listening to, you know, it's a very unhealthy tennis match where we hear one side and then we hear another side. I personally find that any of the specific comments regarding how we can help animals find their permanent homes are helpful. I feel that comments about how the actual structure of the shelter could be better managed are helpful. I cannot support whatsoever any comments that relate to personality attacks or to people by name or to any of email exchanges that might have occurred years ago. I don't see how that goes towards the overall goal. And to me, the overall goal has always been for our animal shelter to find permanent homes, loving homes for these animals, not to worry about the personalities that are involved in the process. And I really hope that everybody can agree with that statement. I believe that when you come to a true divide, it really helps. And I think the grand jury report meant to do this. And you heard a lot of comments today that try to cast aspersions to it to make it seem that it isn't really doing what I would, as a council member, hope that it does. I recognize what Mrs. Meyerson said about bringing in an independent voice, somebody that is an expert.
Sorry, Mark.
No worries. I respect that comment. I think that that is something that will help us try and find a path out of where we are right now. I think that, you know, we've all been through this process. Everybody that's been paying attention to what's going on understands that there's a tremendous amount of passion on both sides because we're dealing with animals' lives, and that's not something that you can take lightly. My best comments are, I can't be an expert on what's going on at the animal shelter because I'm not there. I'm not volunteering. I don't work there. I hear 2 times a week presentations from 2 different groups. I would love to be able to have somebody that is truly an expert to be able to come in and give a unbiased evaluation saying, you know what, it's going the right direction, or there are some areas that we could seek some improvement. Those are my comments.
Well, and for the last 12 years, we've had issues with the animal center, according to some people. But I've never had a grand jury be scrutinized as much as it was tonight, or demonized as much as it was tonight. And never sat on a grand jury, but read a lot of reports from grand juries. And your comments shouldn't be directed to us. If you feel the grand jury isn't qualified and you're questioning their integrity and you think they ought to change their policy on who sits on the grand jury, I've never known a person on the grand jury that was a retired police officer that investigated a police department. I've never known a grand jury person to be a retired firefighter investigate a fire department. That's just not how they operate. And if you think they ought to change their policy, then I think that's where you should go, to the county. But, you know, you made a lot of comments about picking your time and when they should go and when they shouldn't go. A lot of issues about propaganda, vilify, killings, all these words that you use in describing our animal center. We've come a long way with that animal center. I don't think anybody in the animal center, including our veterinarian, comes to work with the idea of killing animals. I just don't see that, and I despise when you use those words, killing. I don't think they like it, but they can't say anything, but I will speak for them. I don't think that's the right way to approach any problems that you think arise or is going on at that animal center. To vilify the grand jury, as you did tonight, I think is unspeakable. I just don't understand where you're coming from. You didn't get what you wanted out of that. They investigated everything that you wrote down, and you're still not happy with that, and you want more. I don't think that I don't think your group will ever be happy with the Animal Center. That's my opinion of it. If there was issues there that came out of that grand jury, it's not nice to make comments like that. I didn't do that when you were talking. Why do you do that when I'm talking? Very inappropriate, so immature. That's the part of what you do that just irks the hell out of me. You just have no respect to do something like that. I don't think it's funny, Bill. I don't think you should be laughing at them.
Well,
Sam, I'm smiling.
Bill,
He said something to me, Dennis.
I understand, but let's let that go. Sad. It really is sad. I can tell you that every single department in the city of Rancho Cucamonga, as far as I'm concerned, and you're going to disagree with me, is trying to run itself at the highest possible level. That's why we get awards nationally, national awards. I believe in my heart of hearts that this city staff strives to get national awards from our Animal Care and Adoption Center. And I know there is a tremendous divergence of opinions right now. And I don't have any problem with somebody coming in and taking a look at our operation. There is nothing, as the grand jury stated, it's a very transparent operation. I don't have a problem with somebody coming in. If that's what staff wants to recommend to the council and we have that discussion, that's fine with me. And if they find things that we can improve upon, that's what we're all about. There is nobody in our Animal Care and Adoption Center that is doing anything but trying to make opportunities to get things done and get things done appropriately. And you may not like, and I've had people tell me that there's people that want people terminated, and that's not our role and it's not your role. And I would agree with Councilmember Steinnorth. If we're talking about making sure that we can find every adoptable pet a home, I'll be your champion. If we're talking about personalities, I can't follow along those lines. That's not our role as elected officials. Our role is to determine, that's the only man this city council hires or fires, other than maybe our city attorney, and he's been here for ages because he's got an outstanding law firm, and we have an outstanding city manager and a high-performing number of department heads. And I will tell you, and you can ask our city manager, but I will tell you right now, we can't move forward because we are being investigated by several other firms. We are worrying about having our staff collect records requests, all kinds of other things that are not positively impacting our ability to get the work done. We could use 3 more people just to handle the kinds of things that are being raised at our Animal Care and Adoption Center. And I applaud and I recognize your passion. And I hope that our city, working with the staff, can find quality opportunities for you folks to help us get animals adopted. You seem to be very good at social media. Maybe we can use your help there. I don't know what the total outcome is going to be, but I can tell you that it saddens me. I don't expect that you're going to go away, and I'm not asking you to. But what I am asking you to is to try to work with us in a more positive manner and not such my 3 minutes are up, and I require the public to do that, so I'm going to honor my own mouth. Let's try to get along. I really do want that more than anything. I really do.